Mono equals one and rail equals rail. And that concludes our 3-week intensive course. At the turn of the 20th century, these two monorail concepts were potentially considered to be the future of the railways. Were they? Did they ever make it? Let's find out. Hello, I'm Rob Scargill. I'm the lead curator of Railway Futures, the Portsbrook Gallery here at the National Railway Museum in York. And today I'm going to be talking about monorails.
What'd I say?
Monorail.
What's it called?
Monorail.
That's right, monorail.
Monorail. Monorail. Monorail.
One of the things that I absolutely love about my role here at the National Railway Museum is that I get to flip history on its head. And these two monorail concepts that I'll be talking about today, these were both created by advocates for futures that they really cared about. One of the inventors, he thought, well, what would happen if cities were all springing up all around me? How could you move people and goods? And another was a utopian dreamer who thought that his transport concept was the key to a fairer world. And they kind of failed in the first instance, but they weren't failures. And that's a really important distinction. And I'll get onto that later on in the video. This is Louis Brennan's monorail car. He was born in Ireland. He was an Irishman. He was born in County Mayo at a place called Castlebar in 1852. This was a devastating period for Ireland at the end of the Great Hunger, where millions of people had either died or were forced to emigrate. Louis Brennan's family, we don't know their motives, but they too emigrated to Melbourne, Australia when Louis Brennan was just a child. He was a brilliant engineer, a really bright engineer growing up, and at around the age of 24 or 25 in 1877, he patented the world's first practical guided missile of all things, Brennan's torpedo. He ended up selling that invention to the British government for £110,000, which was an extraordinary amount of money at the time. It's 11.5 million quid in today's money. He got paid that over 3 years, and apparently, we don't know how true this is, but apparently he turned up to the Bank of England every year on a horse and cart and collected his money in gold bars. And I'm imagining kind of with sunglasses, you know, smoking a cigarette and picking up this money. What does a stinking rich genius then do with all his money then? He's young, he's got all this talent, and what does he do? And that's where this monorail concept comes in. When he was a teenager, he was traveling in Australia, in the Australian bush, and he looked around him and he thought, what would happen if cities were to spring up all around me, if people were to live here? We would need a transport infrastructure, but we can't really afford, in rural Australia, conventional railways. How do we get over this rough terrain in a way that really works and that is cheap and quick to build? And he came up with this idea that he had in his head for ages and ages, which was a train that kind of worked like a tightrope walker. Louis Brennan's on holiday in Cannes in the south of France, and there's a peddler selling toy gyroscopes. Now, Louis Brennan knew all about gyroscopes through his work with the torpedoes. He was really interested in them anyway. And apparently it's that and buying this and experimenting with it while on holiday that led to him actually realizing, oh right, I can actually make this work if I utilize gyroscopic motion. I've brought with me today, this is from the National Railway Museum shop. It's only 12 quid, great for Christmases and birthdays. This is a very similar gyroscope toy, and let's see how gyroscopes work by giving this a go. I'll just get this to work, wish me luck. I'm gonna make myself look a right idiot here if I can't work a child's toy. So I've spun the string round, and then a gyroscope then is any object that shows gyroscopic motion. So I'm gonna spin this here. And then you've got this wheel now that's spinning wheel or disc. And you can see that the gyroscope stays balanced because it conserves angular momentum, which resists change in its rotational motion. And that's exactly the principle behind this monorail car. A really good way to think about this, I suppose, is if you were to take a push bike and you were to grab the front wheel, spin it really fast, and then start to pull the handlebars, you'll face resistance. And then eventually it falls and it stops. Brennan makes an original model where he sticks a gyroscope that spins parallel to the wheels of the train. But as soon as it hit a corner, it derailed. And that's where Brennan comes in with another genius innovation. he brings in a second gyroscope and gets it spinning in the opposite direction to the first, sticks a gear in between the two, and now all of a sudden it creates this counterbalance effect. So actually the train then leans into corners like a motorcyclist would, you know, riding around at 200 miles an hour. And with all the science figured out, he then gets around to commissioning this. This is his second model, and this is kind of the embodiment of all his work to date. The first thing that you can notice really with the model is that it's a beautiful piece of workmanship. It's made of aluminium. It is about 1.8 meters long. It's 75 centimeters wide, and it weighs 58 kilograms as well. You've got your two gyroscopes in here, this nice little section, and you can see those here. This is the thing, obviously, that keeps it nice and balanced, and these spin in a partial vacuum at 8,000 revolutions per minute. And this model as well, it can actually carry up to 10 stone. There's only really children that can ride it. He doesn't have that many friends that weigh under 10 stone, so his kids end up going on this all the time for his experiments. You've got things like, you've got your handbrakes here, you've got your motor-driven wheels at the bottom there. You'll notice actually, if you look at old photographs of the monorail car, that it actually had a cab here. That was only cosmetic. It was only for the purposes of the driver that would eventually be in there. But that's been lost through time. So it's a shame that it's not there. But again, it's only a cosmetic feature. It's quite a simple kind of invention. It's boat shaped as well, as you can see. That's just for air resistance. Here you have the speed and direction controls. You can see here, this is how you move it forwards and backwards. And here as well is how you control the speed. The speed actually went all the way up to 25 miles an hour as well, which was obviously quite quick for a model of this size. This can go over rough terrain, you know, without having to build bridges or that kind of thing. The only infrastructure that you need is a tightrope, and it can be anything. It can be steel, it can be, as long as it can withhold the actual vehicle itself, it can be extremely simple. Winston Churchill, of all people, loved this and backed it, and he was the colonial secretary of the newly elected Liberal government in 1907, and he found behind the back of the settee it would seem £5,000 to fund the development of this concept. That £5,000 was actually matched by the Maharaja of Kashmir, so an Indian prince, who thought that this was the key thing that would get people up and down the Himalayan foothills. Brennan is convinced that this is going to work, and he actually builds two full-scale, full-size versions of this that can carry up to 100 passengers. And he invites all the members of the press to come and see it, and they come, they have a go, and this invention makes the front of the Daily Mirror the next day. With all that in mind, why aren't we riding around in, you know, Brennan's monorail cars now? Well, you know, everybody watching this video right now understands basic gravity. They understand that if you stick a train on a track and it's got two rails on either side, they can understand why it stays balanced. With this, not that many people know about the conservation of angular momentum, and that was something that politicians and decision makers had to come to terms with. Not only that, I suppose a more practical reason that this invention wasn't really realised throughout Brennan's life was you would have to have two gyroscopes in every single piece of rolling stock, so every wagon, every carriage, and that didn't really seem practical either. So the only living realisation of this is this model right here, which has been kept for posterity by the Science Museum Group, and you know, we can tell this story now for generations. If you thought that Louis Brennan was a really inspiring character, wait till I tell you about this guy. So this is Elfric Wells Chalmers Kearney, and I think it seems like more of a coincidence that he's got two Simpsons characters in his name, actually, because we jokingly like to compare him a lot to Lyle Lanley, who sold Springfield its monorail in quite a famous episode.
The name's Lanley, Lyle Lanley. I give you the Springfield monorail.
If anybody has seen that episode, they'll recall that a really good-looking, charismatic, charming salesman comes, sells Springfield its monorail, but where the comparison stops is that that man was a crook, whereas Chalmers Kearney is nothing of the sort. He was born in Geelong in Australia, which is about 50 miles from Melbourne, in 1881, and he actually made the opposite trip to Brennan. So he travelled to the British Isles as a child, where he was educated in England. And he quit a steady job at the age of 21 in order to make his transport concept that he thought could transform the world a reality, and he started on the Kearney High-Speed Tube Railway. He had this obsession throughout his life that the London Underground wasn't all it was cracked up to be. He thought passengers had to make 3 journeys. So first they would go from the ground level, and then they would have to descend down to where the train would take them. And then they had the journey, and then they would go back up the stairs for the worst bit of the journey, where they would then get to where they wanted to be. He believes he can take people from central London to Crystal Palace in 10 minutes. And Kearney's idea was that a passenger would get on at ground level and build a tube that went as far down as the London Underground and go back up again, but you would never have to get off. So what you would do is it'd almost be like a roller coaster where you would start your journey, gravity would take you all the way down to 100 feet below ground, and then gravity again would decelerate the train as you went up. This car is part of a huge demonstrative model that Kearney had commissioned and unveiled to the public for the first time in 1910 in order to sell his transport concept. We've got the track here behind, and you can see that the bottom rail is like a conventional railway. It's the thing that the wheels sit on, but then the thing at the top here is actually a live electric rail. So this powers the car, because you might be thinking, well, it's all well and good. I can see that this train would be able to go down into the surface, but how does it actually come back up? And that's where this power comes in from the top rail. And that rail would be hidden. It would be hidden within the tube or within these little guards that you can see here. And not only that as well, it'd be really up high. So it'd be much safer than conventional electric railways at the time, which had the live rail next to the actual 2 rails of the track. This is where there's a big asterisk as to whether or not this is actually a monorail concept, because this has 2 rails, not 1. And I've seen contrasting evidence throughout the whole of Kearney's career as to whether or not he sold this as a monorail or is definitely not a monorail, depending on who his audience were. You can see at the front here that it is pointed. This is to reduce air resistance. This would be a front car, but there could be multiple cars to form a train. You can see as well that it's got telescopic pillars here. That basically means you can push these up and down depending on the depth of a tube that he would have this car running in. And then on the bottom there, you've got motor-driven wheels as well, which accelerate with electric propulsion. Kearney's a bit of a king of PR, and he's always wearing a sharp suit. And he's the face behind this, and he's there at every time that this thing is demonstrated. He's there, he's the person to talk to, and he sticks his name on here to make sure everybody knows that it's him that you need to speak to. This really is his baby. What's great about this is that it's really energy efficient. It's also really accessible in a way that at the time, if you couldn't take the stairs, well, that's it. You couldn't ride on the underground. Whereas with this, what Kearney was saying is anybody can. He's also thinking of the safety of railways. This is still in a period at the early 20th century where there are a lot of railway disasters. And what's great about this design is if you have the 2 rails at the top and bottom, there is no way at all that this thing can derail, which isn't the case for the conventional railway. And he believes that this is a far safer way of transporting people around. In fact, he was so confident actually that this system would work that in 1911, so the year after that this got unveiled to the public, he actually built or commissioned a full-size scale version of this that would house 44 passengers. He was told that he would get to demonstrate this full-size model, but unfortunately the invitation was taken away from him. I think because of the logistics of actually making it work, and things go from bad to worse from there, really. In the 1920s, Kearney decides, right, I'm going to try and sell this across the world. So he tries to sell a scheme in Nice in France. He tries to sell a scheme in Toronto in Canada, in New York in America, and Sydney in Australia, all of which get to the similar point of potentially getting commission and then just not happening. Then in 1939, another world war breaks out. And this time Kearney's ready for this. He thinks, well, my system would be perfect as air raid shelters. So while bombs are being dropped down by the Luftwaffe in Britain, people could hide in the tunnel infrastructure that would be built underneath. He says you can get 16,000 people in each mile, and there could be seats in there, there could be lights in there. But I think you know the answer by now. It doesn't happen. Kearney is disillusioned, and he ends up doing the most bizarre PR we've seen from him. In 1943, he publishes this work of fiction by him called Erone. It's a sci-fi novel. It's a utopian sci-fi novel. It's a romantic novel as well. There's romance in here. And it's set on the planet Uranus. A civilization, much like the human race, exists there, and they are really happy, and they're really kind to each other, and they really love each other. And key to that happiness is the transport concept that they get around using, which is Kearney's high-speed tube railway. This is from the first chapter, as Kearney is introducing the main characters. "You're an engineer?" he asked, his interest quickening. "What line?" "I am what is called an all-round man, civil, electrical, mechanical, structural, in fact, a railway engineer." "You're a railway engineer?" he exclaimed, as if it was the most surprising news. "I suppose you don't happen to know anything about monorailways?" "About as much as any railway engineer knows. They happen to be a specialty of mine." This matter-of-fact statement had an astonishing effect upon him. He leapt a foot up in the air, clapped his hands and almost shouted, "This is marvellous." A bit like Brennan then, I guess you're thinking, why aren't we all riding around, in Kearney high-speed tube railways? And I guess the reason lies in the fact that, well, the London Underground, for a start, is a very complex system. You'd need to build in and around that system, and that just seemed needlessly complicated. And then for all the other schemes, they seem to always connect pieces of land that's separated by water. And quite frankly, ferries or bridges, especially after the Second World War when people are starting to own their own private vehicles, it just seemed like that was a more practical solution. Kearney ends up living the rest of his life, unfortunately, without ever having realised his ultimate ambition. I said at the start of the video that I didn't think that either of these inventions were failures, and they're not. I mean, if you look back on the decades that have taken place since this, you've got tilting trains on the West Coast mainland, that are integral to rail travel in Britain today. You've got gyroscopes that are used in submarines, in aircraft. And there's even a scheme in Germany called monocab, and they actually want to take Brennan's Gyrocar concept and literally make that. So they want these cab-hailed services that you can have, where you get a vehicle on one rail and a vehicle on the other rail, and you can hail it on an app. And the way that they make that work is through gyroscopics. So what I would say is, if you have an idea, like you should do it. We have as much air in our lungs as these two inventors did. And it's up to us really to take action in the present to get to the futures that we want to see. So I would ask everybody who's watching this video to ask themselves 3 questions. First of all, what kind of world do you want to live in the future? Second of all, what kind of challenges are in the way of getting to that future? And finally, how do you solve those challenges? If you've enjoyed watching this film, please consider liking and subscribing our YouTube channel and follow us on all socials for any further information. And this is demonstrating the exact same properties as what would happen on Brennan's monorail car. That's as good as we're getting, I'm telling you. Yeah.